Who does not know the United States of America, a superpower country that has superior, intelligent human resources, and highly upholds human rights? That's now. If we talk a few decades ago, America is one of the countries that has a dark history of humanity. In this video we will discuss a very touching incident. An incident caused by the breakdown of the government system and the political egoism of a group of people. Before we continue, we remind you that the incident we are telling is a true story, not a film, so don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get straight to the story, and welcome to Shania Studio. A few decades ago, America was a very racist country. A few decades ago, all things in people's lives were distinguished on the basis of skin color. Likewise in the state of South Carolina, United States in 1944, where two groups of the same people lived, separated by railroad tracks that separated black and white. In the black area, lived a family with 5 children, 3 sons and 2 daughters. The father was named George Stinney Sr., who worked as a builder. The mother named Dame Stinney, who daily takes care of the household. Their first and second son, named John Junius Stinney, 17 years old, and George Junius Stinney Jr., 14 years old. On the 24th of March, 1944, 2 little girls were seen riding their bicycles in black territory. They were Betty June Benica, who was 11 years old, and Mary Emma Thames, who was 7 years old. 2 white girls were in black territory. This was very rare in those days. It turns out they are looking for maypops flowers that are widely available in the area. While riding their bicycles, Betty and Mary passed the Stinneys' house. They then asked George where to pick the flowers. George also told the 2 girls and they immediately continued their journey. Suddenly the next day, police officers came to the Stinneys' house and arrested John and George Jr. Their parents asked about what really happened. But the officer did not explain anything and immediately took John and George to the police station. It turned out that Betty and Mary were found dead in the black area. The 2 girls died after being hit by a blunt object which was suspected to be a railroad track. According to someone who is not clear who it is, the perpetrator is only one person and named Junius. In the area there are only 2 people named Junius, namely John Junius and George Junius. That's the reason the officers arrested the 2 boys. After arriving at the police station, they were questioned by officers. Although John and George were minors, they were not accompanied by a lawyer or his family. There the 2 boys said that they knew nothing about the incident. But the police still forced them to admit their actions. They are not even fed for 2 days, and will be fed after they confess the deed. His older brother, John, still insisted that he didn't know anything. But unlike his brother, because he was very young and already very hungry, George could not help but admit what he had done. Because according to information from the perpetrator, there was only one person, John was released by the police. When he got home, John told about the discriminatory actions carried out by police officers. Many people were upset by this action and complained to the mayor. However, considering that at that time white people were very superpowered, and the mayor named Olin D. Johnstow was also white, the demands and complaints just disappeared. Behind bars, George bemoaned his fate. Then a month later, on the 24th of April, 1944, the trial was held. All the officers at the trial were white, judges, lawyers, public prosecutors and even the jury were white. Then what about George's lawyer? He is just as white. Without clear evidence, the public prosecutor accused George of the culprit. What's even sadder is that the lawyer who was supposed to be defending George has also cornered him. George was absolutely terrified and there was no one to defend him. It didn't take long, only 10 minutes. The judge gave the verdict. George was found guilty and would be sentenced to death by electrocution in the electric chair. Day after day, George was helplessly waiting for his death. Then on the 16th of June, 1944, only 83 days after he was arrested by the police, in front of the Betty and Mary families, George was seated on the execution chair. But because the body is still small, the chair must be added with books first, so that the tool on the head can be installed. The officer then gave George one last chance to say something. But the child just cried while shaking his head. And execution is carried out. After 8 minutes of electricity, yes, 8 minutes, George's life returned to God's lap. At that time, family, relatives and closest people could not do anything, because the system in that country clearly sided with the whites. George is the youngest person to be sentenced to death in the United States. In 2014, relatives and activists succeeded in proving George's innocence. When the sentencing took place, many legal defects were carried out by the authorities, some of which were: first, George was not physically proven to have done so, and there were no witnesses who saw firsthand that George was the culprit. The second, after being re-examined, the suspect actually has a large body and strong strength, while George was small. Third, the acknowledgement letter which was used as evidence in court was never signed by George, Administratively the letter is invalid. Fourth, the mayor at that time did not want to interfere in George's case. Because he was currently running for a senator election, and he did not want his image to appear weak by agreeing to black people's requests. With all that irrefutable evidence, after 70 years, the judge finally decided that George was innocent. Then who is the real culprit? Until this moment the real culprit is still a mystery. Betty and Mary lost their lives in a very tragic way, but because of the bad governance and socio-political system, instead of arresting the real perpetrators, the authorities actually increased the number of victims. To commemorate the tragic story that befell George, the government made a memorial stone that reads "Wrongly convicted, illegally executed by South Carolina, conviction vacated by court order," dated the 16th of December, 2014. The incident that happened to George was adapted into a novel entitled Triple Tragedy in Alcolu. A short film was made to commemorate this incident, entitled 83 Days. The title is taken from the number of days when George was arrested until he was executed. The most famous, and you've seen it, is the film Green Mile, starring Tom Hanks. This film was inspired by the incident that happened to George Jr.
You're talking about
in a place like this, unbelievable miracle of all. That happened here, where I work. On the Green Mile.
Talk about racism. Racism is part of us as human beings. What distinguishes the level of racism from one person to another is only the level of racism that flows in each individual. Maybe you guys think, no, I'm not racist. Okay, fine, I'll ask you a question. If there are two people you don't know, namely A and B, both of them need your help, but you can only help one person, and A is from the same city as you, while B is from a city out of nowhere. Which one would you tend to help? Write in the comments column. Thank you. See you in another Shania Studio video.